The person you're crying over right now might be the very reason your life was stuck. Let that sink in. You keep asking God why they left, why they changed, why they pulled away, why the connection suddenly died. But what if heaven didn't lose them? What if heaven removed them? You prayed for growth. You prayed for peace. You prayed for purpose. But you never imagined the answer to that prayer would look like separation. Because separation feels like rejection. It feels like failure. It feels like being replaced. It feels like not being enough. And now you're replaying everything. The texts, the conversations, the last moment things felt normal. You're wondering what you did wrong. You're tempted to fix it, to reach out, to prove your value one more time. But here's the dangerous truth. When you chase what God is removing, you delay what He is preparing. Not everyone who enters your life is a sign to your destiny. Some people are lessons. Some are confirmations. Some are distractions. And some are weight you were never meant to carry into your next season. The pain you feel right now isn't always loss. Sometimes it's pruning. And pruning never feels good while it's happening, but it makes growth possible. So before you send that message, before you beg for clarity, before you lower your standards just to keep them, you need to hear this. If God removed them, it wasn't random. And by the end of this message, you'll understand why the separation you're mourning might actually be protection. Sinai. Let's be honest. It doesn't just hurt because they left. It hurts because you didn't see it coming. You were still investing, still believing, still planning. And while you were building the future in your mind, they were already detaching in their heart. That's what makes it painful. Not just the absence, but the shock. One day, everything feels normal. The next day, the energy shifts. The texts get shorter. The calls get fewer. The warmth turns neutral. And you feel it. You feel the distance before they ever admit it. But you ignore it. Because you don't want it to be true. So you try harder. You become more patient, more understanding, more available. You overextend yourself trying to preserve something that's already slipping through your hands. And when it finally breaks, you don't just lose them. You lose the version of the future you had already imagined with them. That's why it feels devastating. You're not just grieving a person. You're grieving the conversations you thought you'd have, the memories you thought you'd make, the stability you thought was secure. And here's the part nobody talks about. It hits your identity. Because rejection whispers a lie. It says, you weren't enough. Not attractive enough. Not interesting enough. Not valuable enough. And if you're not careful, you start believing it. You start measuring your worth based on who stayed. You start questioning your standards just to avoid feeling that pain again. You start thinking, if I were better, they would have stayed. But pause for a second. Since when did someone else's ability to recognize your value become the measurement of your value? Not everyone leaves because you lack something. Some leave because they lack the capacity to carry who you are becoming. And that's hard to accept because it's easier to blame yourself than to admit that the season shifted. The truth is, separation feels like failure when you don't understand the timing. It feels like abandonment when you don't see the bigger picture. And right now, you might not see it. All you feel is the ache, the silence, the absence. But what if this pain is not proof you lost something valuable? What if it's proof something valuable is about to begin? Before we talk about purpose and separation, you need to understand something deeper. Rejection is rarely random, and what feels personal is often directional. Rejection feels personal. It feels targeted. It feels like a verdict, as if someone looked at you, saw everything you are, and decided, no. That's why it cuts so deep, because it doesn't just touch your emotions. It touches your identity. You start asking questions you never asked before. Was I too much? Was I not enough? Did I love too hard? Did I expect too much? And slowly, you turn inward. You dissect yourself. You analyze your tone, your timing, your personality. You look for flaws, like a detective searching for evidence. But here's something uncomfortable. Not everything that ends is a reflection of your worth. Sometimes it's a reflection of alignment. Two people can be good and still not be aligned. Two people can care and still not be assigned to the same future. But because rejection feels emotional, you interpret it as personal failure. And the enemy of your growth loves when you internalize what was never yours to carry. Because if you believe you were the problem, you'll shrink. You'll lower standards. You'll silence parts of yourself. You'll try to become easier to keep. But growth doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from alignment. Here's a truth most people learn too late. Not everyone has the capacity to walk into your next season. Some people only had the capacity for your current version. And when you start evolving, when your mindset shifts, when your standards rise, when your direction becomes clearer, misalignment becomes uncomfortable, and discomfort creates distance. It doesn't always mean someone is evil. It doesn't always mean someone betrayed you. Sometimes it just means you're no longer moving in the same direction. But because you can't see the future yet, you panic. You assume loss. You assume mistake. You assume you need to fix something. But what if nothing is broken? What if this isn't about you being rejected, but about you being redirected? Think about it. If someone isn't built for where you're going, keeping them would only create friction later. And friction at the wrong altitude can destroy progress. That's why some separations feel sudden. Because once alignment ends, prolonging it only increases damage. And here's the deeper layer. Sometimes God allows emotional discomfort to reveal what logic tried to ignore. You saw the red flags. You felt the imbalance. You sensed the shift. But you stayed. Because attachment can be louder than wisdom. And when attachment won't release, sometimes removal happens for you. Rejection feels personal, but often it's directional. It's not saying you're unworthy. It's saying you're moving. And movement requires different company. Before you chase someone who stepped back, ask yourself, are you grieving the person or the role you wanted them to play in your life? Because those are not the same thing. And understanding that difference changes everything. Here's the part nobody likes to admit. Sometimes you weren't rejected. You were rescued. You were holding on to something God was already trying to release. But because it felt good, because it felt familiar, because it felt safe, you ignored the warning signs. You ignored the subtle shifts, the inconsistency, the imbalance, the quiet feeling that something wasn't fully right. You told yourself, it'll get better. They'll change. I just need to be more patient. But patience and denial are not the same thing. And sometimes what you call loyalty is actually fear of letting go, fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of not finding something better. So you hold on tighter, even when peace is gone, even when clarity is gone, even when joy feels forced, and when you won't release it willingly. Removal feels violent, not physically, but emotionally, because it breaks the illusion you were building your future on. But here's the dangerous truth. If God didn't remove it, you would have built your life around it. You would have adjusted your standards. You would have silenced your convictions. You would have shaped your future to fit something temporary. And temporary things cannot sustain permanent purpose. Sometimes the relationship wasn't bad. It was just too small for where you're going. Sometimes the opportunity wasn't evil. It was just a distraction. Sometimes the person wasn't toxic. They were just not assigned to your next season. But because you couldn't see that yet, you called it loss. You called it heartbreak. You called it rejection. But heaven called it protection. Let that sink in. What you cried over might be the very thing that would have broken you later. What you begged to keep might have delayed everything you prayed for. And here's the part that changes perspective. God doesn't remove something good to leave you empty. He removes something limited to make room for something aligned. But growth never feels like gain at first. It feels like loss. Because your comfort is being stretched. Your attachment is being challenged. Your vision is being upgraded. And upgrades require detachment. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. The pain isn't proof you failed. It's proof you were moving towards something bigger than your current attachment. The question is not, why did this happen to me? The real question is, what was this preventing me from becoming? Because sometimes the only way forward is through a door you didn't choose to close. And sometimes, the very thing you're grieving was the very thing holding you back. There's a pattern most people miss. Elevation never starts with applause. It starts with separation. Before every upgrade, something old has to fall away. Before every new level, there's a letting go you didn't plan for. And rejection? It's often the signal that your environment can no longer sustain your growth. Think about it. When you grow, your standards shift. When your standards shift, your tolerance drops. When your tolerance drops, misalignment becomes visible. And when misalignment becomes visible, distance becomes inevitable. Elevation requires lighter weight. You cannot rise while carrying people who are comfortable with where you used to be. You cannot step into new capacity while holding on to old identity. And this is where most people sabotage themselves. They confuse comfort with calling. They chase familiarity instead of destiny. But here's what rejection quietly does. It detaches you. from spaces that were shrinking you. It disrupts routines that were numbing you. It forces reflection you were avoiding. And reflection leads to clarity. Clarity leads to conviction. Conviction leads to movement. And movement leads to elevation. Notice the order. Rejection feels like loss because it removes support. But sometimes that support was limiting your stretch. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable growth feels? New standards feel lonely. New discipline feels isolating. New vision feels misunderstood. Because elevation changes your circle before it changes your circumstances. And that gap, that in-between season, where nothing feels stable, that's where most people quit. But that space is not punishment. It's preparation. It's where your identity catches up to your future. It's where you stop seeking validation and start walking in assignment. And here's the part nobody talks about. The people who reject you at one level often wouldn't recognize you at the next, because elevation changes posture. It changes confidence. It changes discernment. You start moving differently, speaking differently, choosing differently, and the same doors that once closed on you won't even feel necessary anymore. You won't want what you used to beg for. You won't chase what you once feared losing. That's elevation. Not just better circumstances, but a better version of you. Rejection is not the end of your story. It's the edit. It cuts what doesn't fit. It sharpens your direction. It clears space for alignment. And when the right doors open, you'll realize something powerful. Nothing that left was capable of carrying who you're becoming. Rejection is not what defines you. Your response does. You can't always control who leaves. You can't control who misunderstands you. You can't control who walks away. But you can control what you build next. And most people waste rejection trying to prove something. They want revenge success. They want validation growth. They want to show everyone what they lost. But elevation built on ego never lasts. So here's how you respond differently. First, don't chase closure from people who already closed the door. Silence is closure. Distance is closure. Their decision is closure. Stop reopening conversations God already ended. Second, don't internalize everything. Not every rejection is correction. Sometimes it's redirection. Sometimes you weren't too much. You were just too aligned for a space built on compromise. Third, upgrade quietly. Rejection is free fuel. Use it. Build discipline. Strengthen your mindset. Refine your craft. Deepen your faith. Let your transformation speak louder than your frustration. Because when you grow silently, results make the noise for you. Fourth, forgive faster than your ego wants to. Bitterness anchors you to the level you're trying to leave. Forgiveness doesn't excuse behavior. It frees your future. And finally, shift the question. Stop asking, why did they reject me? Start asking, what is this preparing me for? Because every door that closes creates pressure, and pressure either breaks you or builds you. Diamonds don't form without resistance, and neither does resilience. The truth? If it didn't work out, it wasn't aligned with where you're going. And if it was aligned, it wouldn't have left. So instead of chasing what's gone, position yourself for what's coming. Because rejection is not the opposite of elevation. It's the prerequisite. One day, you won't even remember how bad this felt. You'll only remember how necessary it was. And when that new door opens, you'll thank God for the one that closed. Right now, you feel like something ended, like a chapter closed too early, like a door shut before you were ready. But what if the door you're praying to open is waiting for you to become ready? Because doors don't just open based on desire. They open based on alignment. You don't step into new levels with old mindsets. You don't walk into answered prayers with the same insecurity that made you beg for what left. Growth is the bridge, and rejection, that was the push onto it. Think about who you were before this happened. More attached, more dependent, more afraid of losing. Now, you're stronger, more aware, more discerning. You don't trust words as easily. You read patterns. You value peace. That's not damage. That's development. Sometimes God allows what breaks your heart to rebuild your standards. Sometimes He allows the shaking to remove what was loosely attached. Because the future you're stepping into requires emotional maturity. It requires spiritual stability. It requires confidence that isn't dependent on applause. And here's the beautiful part. The right opportunities won't need convincing. The right people won't need chasing. The right doors won't need forcing. Alignment feels different. There's peace in it, clarity in it, stability in it. You won't be anxious trying to hold it together. You won't feel like you're auditioning to stay. You'll feel chosen, secure, positioned. So if you're in that in-between season right now, don't rush it. Don't panic. Don't downgrade just because you're uncomfortable. This space isn't empty. It's preparation. You're not being delayed. You're being refined. And when what's meant for you arrives, you'll understand why everything else had to leave. Before you leave this video, pause for a second. Breathe. If you're in a season where things feel uncertain, where doors have closed, where people have left, where silence feels louder than answers, you are not abandoned. You are being realigned. And maybe you don't see it yet. Maybe it still hurts. Maybe you're still asking why. But one day, clarity will replace confusion. Peace will replace pressure. And you'll realize this wasn't rejection. It was redirection. So let's pray. God, if something left my life that wasn't meant to stay, give me the strength not to chase it. If a door closed that I was trying to force open, give me the wisdom to trust your timing. Heal the part of me that feels rejected. Remove the fear that makes me settle. Build the confidence that doesn't depend on approval. Align me with what is truly mine. Detach me from what is not. And if I'm in the middle of becoming, give me patience to grow into it. I don't want what's comfortable. I want what's aligned. I don't want what's temporary. I want what's purposeful. And even when I don't understand, teach me to trust. Amen.